Hey there, it's Jennifer McGuire. Today I wanted to show you a fun technique where you can combine two of the most popular trends in card making right now, watercolor and die cuts. So you can see here I created this whole piece with some fake watercoloring and I did some die cutting also. And this is really quite easy and quick to do. I'm going to show you some tricks throughout the video of how you can create this using just inks, water, and die cutting. So I'm starting out with some watercolor paper. I think watercolor paper is key to making this work really well. Hero Arts has watercolor paper, Tim Holtz has watercolor paper, any kind of good quality watercolor paper works well. Now I'm taking the ink blending tool and rubbing on some Broken China and Salty Ocean Distress inks. Now the reason I'm using distress inks is because when these come in contact with water, they move about and kind of turn into a watercolor. So you could use other inks for this, but they won't work nearly as well as distress inks would. If you don't have distress inks, you could just scribble areas of watercolor or put some watercolor paints in areas. It really doesn't matter. Now you'll notice here that this doesn't look perfect. It's kind of a mess, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and take some adhesive and just temporarily adhere this to a piece of white cardstock. And this is just kind of my holding ground here. So now I'm going to spray it generously with my Hero Arts water bottle. You'll see I'm putting so much on here that it becomes a giant puddle on my paper. I'm putting on a ton of it. The reason I adhered that paper to some scrap paper is so that it lays nice and flat even when you spray it with water. And I'm just kind of moving the color around. You saw me mix it a little bit with my fingers. It really doesn't matter how you do this. Now here's the fun part. You take your heat gun and you're doing two things with the heat gun here. You're moving the color around and you're drying it all at once. So this takes a little bit of time, and watch, I'm just tilting the paper to move the puddles of water around. By doing this, I'm actually going to end up, when this gets dried, I'll end up with a watercolored looking background. I'm not real great with free watercoloring, with a paintbrush, but this is a great way to achieve that look without, taking too much effort. So you see it's starting to dry and you're starting to get some lines and variations in color, and I just keep moving the paper around, letting the ink move around and the water move around, and drying it all at once. This takes about 5 minutes, not even that. It just takes a few minutes. You just keep moving it and drying it. I'm using the Milwaukee heat gun, which Hero Arts sells. It's a really good quality heat gun, but any heat gun would work for this. So now you can see it's getting close to being completely dry, and you can see that those great kind of areas of color here. They're just beautiful. Now I am going to take this off my scrap paper, and I also heat it from the back side because some color will probably slip underneath it and it might be wet on the back side, and also it helps to flatten it. So now let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the card here. Next we need to die cut this fun branch. So this branch, I did the same technique, but I used a couple different colors. I used some browns and some greens so that we could get the variation here. I used the new Hero Arts Spring Branch die. That's the die you see here, and I die cut a piece from watercolor paper, the same type of watercolor paper I used before. And I'm using sponge daubers this time to apply some distress ink to the die cut. Now the reason I'm using the sponge daubers is because you can get smaller areas. Now you'll see here I wanted to just get the branch brown, so I've got a piece of masking tape to kind of mask off the leaves so that I didn't make that whole leaf brown. But I'm not being super careful. I don't feel like this needs to be absolutely perfect because when we spray water on it, it'll all blend together anyways. But I am trying to keep the brown as much as I can on the branch only. Now if you had watercolor markers, you could see it'd be really easy just to color the branch brown and the leaves green. But I wanted to stick with the distress inks. So now I've misted it heavily with water once again. You'll see that some of the ink bleeds onto the uninked leaves. That's okay. We'll cover it up in just a moment. Dried that, and there you can see the fun watercolor we get. Now notice it does lighten up because we're putting so much water on it. That's okay. We can add some more color later. Next I'm going in with some peeled paint green and adding some just to the base of the leaves here, kind of where that brown started to bleed into the leaves. And then I'm going back with Mowed Lawn, which is a brighter green, to add to the rest of the leaves. Now if you don't have little sponge daubers or inking tools, you could use your fingers for this also. Now I need to go ahead and spray this one too, and we'll get some of the bleeding color back and forth. That's okay. I'm spraying it pretty generously here. The water will pool up on it. That's okay too. And then I'm just going to heat set this, and as I heat it I can kind of move that color around and make sure the green goes out towards the tips of the branch and keep away from the brown branch itself. Now you'll notice again that this is turning light because we added so much water. So what I ended up doing is I decided to kind of double up just on the branch. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more brown ink just on the branch itself. I feel like the leaves are vibrant enough, but by intensifying that brown it'll stand out some more. After I've inked it, I will mist it up one more time and then I will heat set it, and then we have the final color of the branch. Now I could just adhere this onto our watercolor background, but I decided to instead do a die cut inlay. This is a really popular technique in card making right now, and it's better to see it than to try to explain it. So let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to take that same die and die cut it from our watercolor panel. So I just ran it through, any die cut machine would work. And now I have a piece of scrap paper here. This is just typing paper that's slightly smaller than my watercolor panel, and I'm covering it generously with adhesive, especially in the area towards the top where our branch will be. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick this on the back of the panel, and basically what I've done is all that open area where the branch is, it has lots of adhesive on it, so I can go ahead and piece in the watercolor die cut that we created earlier, and then you end up with one smooth surface. So this will fit in just like a puzzle piece, very quick and easy to do. And this way you can also be sure that this little intricate die cut is protected as it goes through the mail, that it won't get caught on anything. It's nice and tucked in to the negative space of that blue piece. Just gives this gorgeous inlay look that I think is just beautiful, and gives it also another option for a one-layer card. Now I need to trim off the edge here. For some reason I didn't do a good job die cutting that branch as a full piece, so I just went ahead and trimmed that off. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a greeting here. I could have gone with something dark like a black greeting, but I thought something soft with all this watercolor would be nice. So I'm going to do white embossing. So I'm using my embossing powder tool to provide some anti-static before I do the stamping and embossing. And then I have this new greeting from Hero Arts. The stamp set's called Enjoy Today. I'm taking the happy birthday greeting. Any greeting would work with this style of card. Inking it up with Versamark ink, which is just a clear sticky ink. You won't see it after I stamp it. But then I'm going to take some white embossing powder and add that to it. I use the Hero Arts white embossing powder. It's a nice fine white and it's a true white color, so I really like that powder. So I have mine in a container here because I use it so much. So I'm just going to put some on, tap it off, and heat set it. And you can see that white turns out really nice up against that soft blue background. Now let's turn this into a card. I've got lots of foam adhesive on the back of this panel. I'm putting a lot of foam adhesive on the back, more foam adhesive than I normally would use, because this kind of has a little warp to it because it was a watercolor piece, and this will help to make it nice and flat. I decided this needed a little something else, so I'm adding some pearls and gems from the Hero Arts Mix Accents package. This is the sunshine color. It's got some orange and yellows, and I'm just putting trios and pairs on different spots on the branch. You could keep this a more flat card if you just die cut or punched little circles and added those instead. I think this adds a little bit of interest though. So there you have a card that combines two popular trends right now, watercoloring and die cut. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, visit the Hero Arts blog.